Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And this is Midday with Reverend Don. And today is Friday, and I hope you're having a lovely Friday. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your questions or comments into whatever platform you happen to be seeing it on. They will appear here in my chat room, and we can talk directly. And today, since we've been talking about various things regarding Yule for much of the week, I thought today I would talk about the ambient holiday. And what do I mean by the ambient holiday? Well, I mean, here in North America, we are surrounded by celebrations of the Christian holiday of Christmas. And no matter what religion you are, that ambient holiday is everywhere. And many pagans also will be celebrating that holiday either because they have family who are Christian or because they just like a good excuse for a party. So we have um, not a great distance from the ambient holiday. It is an inescapable force. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about that today because, of course, for, um, for me as a Corellian, my holiday was yesterday, the holiday of Yule, the winter solstice. But I know that I'm going to be surrounded by people celebrating the ambient holiday for several days to come. And having grown up surrounded by the ambient holiday, many of those traditions I actually have fondness for. I can remember as a child, every Christmas Eve, they would play um, the movie The Christmas Carol on the local television stations, if you're old enough to remember television stations. And I can remember watching it most years because it was a good movie and a good story, and it had ghosts in it. And, around this time of year, I still like to watch that movie. Either the 1930 version or the 1930s version or the 1960s version. Um, either one of them I find very nostalgic. And hello to Magical Mermaid in the chat room. And Magical Mermaid uh, describes it as a non-denominational holiday. Um, and yet for many people, it's more of a secular celebration, um, which is made up of influences from a number of religions. And I hardly need go on about how many things have been applied to the Christmas holiday that have pagan origin um, and are shared with Yule. And I don't personally see this as a bad thing. You often hear pagans talk about how Christians stole all our stuff, um, or alternatively, you hear Christians go on about the pagan origins of this custom or that custom. Hello to Janet in the chat room. It's good to see you, Janet. It's worth bearing in mind that Protestant Christians outlawed the practice of Christmas for quite a good period of time because they perceived it as primarily a pagan festival. Um, and so there's a lot of exchange between these things. But the way I look at it, it's an aspect of the culture that we live in. We might as well enjoy it. It's there. Um, I do not celebrate the ambient holiday. But I'm not particularly disturbed by it either. I think it brings a lot of joy to a lot of people. Also brings a lot of financial stress to a lot of people, which is an aspect of the ambient holiday that I think could use a little adjustment. Um, but many of the aspects I think are fun. Some of the old television specials that still show up, like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and so forth, were quite enjoyable. And usually um, were not particularly related to the Christian religion. They dealt with what some would call the secular elements of the holiday, which is to say those that are actually shared between multiple religions. Um, and Magical Mermaid says that's right. People are unaware of the origins of their holidays and belief systems. And hello to Mary in the chat room. Mary says, "Hello, Lord Don. I miss you. I miss you too, Mary. I look forward to seeing you again sometime soon, and I hope everything is very good in Florida." Um, yeah, I mean, people across the board. And why wouldn't they be unaware of the origins of their holidays and belief systems? They're constantly intermingling and evolving. Hello to Lavola in the chat room. It's good to see you, Lavola. One of the things I often talk about, it's very fashionable these days for people to take the point of view of everything being separate. The carrots must never touch the peas. But historically speaking, that has never been the case. People have always shared their customs, their views, etc. And there's rarely ever been a hard line in practice between different religious and philosophical schools as people actually live them. And so, of course, when you look at the Christian religion, it's heavily influenced by pagan ideas. And when you look at certainly modern paganism, it's heavily influenced by certain Christian ideas and by Buddhist ideas and many others. And why wouldn't it be? It's only one world, and it's only natural that we adapt what works from each other. And I think that that actually is a strength, not a weakness. I'm a great believer in the idea of one doing what works, adapting what's practical, and the idea that purity is not a particularly good thing. I think if you look at anything obsessed with the idea of purity, whether we're talking about racial purity or cultural purity or religious purity, it's never usually on the right side of history. And it also is usually rather fragile and unable to adapt when the time comes that it must adapt. Um, it might have a little strength for a short period of time, but nothing ever stays the same. And we were talking about this, well, just yesterday, that change is the one constant in life. And you cannot have the idea that nothing in your belief system, nothing in your culture is ever going to change or be influenced by anyone else. Of course, it's going to be. So, when we look at the ambient holiday, I perceive that as just part of our life in a wonderfully integrated world, and we certainly should respect and to some extent enjoy it. Those of us who come from families that also celebrate the ambient holiday, there's nothing wrong in celebrating it with them. Um, I mean, one of the key points of view of my Corellian background and many other modern pagan movements is the idea that all paths ultimately can lead to deity. And I say it in a very particular way. They can lead to deity, um, and so there's no need to have a bad reaction to the ambient holiday. When one of the things I've seen lately a lot on Facebook is a meme talking about how you have never heard pagans getting upset that everyone doesn't say Happy Yule. Um, that's not entirely true for the entire time I've been in this movement, but it's mostly true. We see ourselves as just one of many different religious movements, um, and I can't imagine expecting everyone else to bow to that. In fact, I rather like the fact that there's so many different midwinter holidays. And so when we look at the ambient holiday, we mostly mean Christmas, but there are other things going on at this time too, which are ambient in the air. And what do we mean by ambient? We mean again that it's all around us. We can't miss it. Um, we can't hide from it. So our question is, how do we react to it? And this also speaks to a lot of other things um, in the world, which we deal with as a minority religion. And, for the most part, my attitude is that we do need to be very mindful of our position. We need to be very mindful of our rights and making sure these are respected. We need to be very mindful of our freedom. Um, but we don't necessarily need to be censorious of other people's practices. They have as much right to their practices as we do. It's simply a matter of making sure we all have those rights. And for me, when it comes to most aspects of life, that is my number one concern, to make sure that our right to be who we are continues to be respected. In some places, that it comes to be respected, because there are certainly those who do not acknowledge that, particularly in certain parts of the world. And I hope for a future where not only us, as modern pagans, but all minority religions, um, and majority religions can have the same rights to their beliefs and their practices, as long as they're not hurting anyone. And um, I think that that is the ideal future. Are we going to see that future? Well, in some places, I think we will. In some places, not anytime soon. But that doesn't mean it's not still the future we should be working for. Some years ago, I want to say it was the year 15 Aquarius, 2015. We started the Corellian Peace Prayer campaign, and we've been doing it ever since. And the Reverend Sir Rolando Camon, Apu Adman Agama, is probably our leading is our leading peace warrior at this time. Um, the Reverend Sir Terriot has been one of our leading peace warriors. The Reverend Sir Colin Keller has been one of our leading peace warriors, and many others. Um, but currently, Sir Rolando is certainly our largest voice for peace. But all of us, I hope, are connected and committed to this campaign. And part of what we talk about is that peace is not simply the absence of physical struggle, of physical conflict, but peace is being able to live your life, regardless of who you are, with freedom and dignity, as long as you're not hurting anyone else. Because you can certainly have situations where you have no physical conflict, but you also don't have the freedom to live your life. And that is not peace. Certainly not what I mean by that. So, what we do is we have many prayers for peace. Once a month, we try to join together as a tradition, but we also work individually. Um, some of our individual orders have particular things they do. Some of our individual temples have particular things that they do. And I'm very proud of the peace campaign. I think it's one of the best things that we have done. And I hope to see it continue to go forward. But, its purpose in part is what I've just been talking about, making sure that all of our rights are respected. It's not just a matter of an absence of physical violence or physical conflict. It's also the justice of being able to live your life. And we do not have peace if we do not have the ability to live our lives. And that's true for all of us. One of the things about oh, and hello to Jason in the chat room. It's good to see you, Jason. One of the things about the Peace Prayer campaign, I was surprised when we started how many people objected to it on the premise that we could never have perfect peace. And of course, my answer to that was, well, it's not about perfect peace. It's about greater peace. Um, we certainly are not going to pray a totally peaceful world into existence overnight. Um, And I don't think that we will create a totally peaceful world simply through prayer ever. But that doesn't mean that we can't make a more peaceful world. And hello to Renee in the chat room. It's good to see you, Renee. And my attitude is the more peace we have, it doesn't matter if it's perfect peace. It matters that there's more, that we are building a better world, not necessarily an immediately perfect world, because nothing that you work on is going to be perfect immediately. Many things will never be anything resembling perfect. And as we were talking about yesterday, if you manage to bring something to a point of perfection, well, then it must change. It cannot stay at that level. It is the journey and the process of creating a better situation that life really is about. Um, but it's very important, I think, for us to be constantly focused on building that better world, building that greater peace. And oh, and we have a troll, so we will not acknowledge that. Um, it always makes me wonder what people like this think they're accomplishing, other than bringing themselves into disrepute. Um, and I certainly hope that our own people will see that as a an object lesson of how not to be in life. Um, it it just really makes you wonder what kind of person you're dealing with when you see things like that. And Lavola says trolls are so rude. Yes, they are. And you know that but trolls are also one of the costs of being a public person, of doing public broadcasting. And while we're talking about greater peace, this is something we must look at. It is part of the situation. Because what are we talking about here? We're talking about trying to make a more peaceful world, a world with greater justice for everyone. And this person comes in to object to that. Um, Now that tells you everything you need to know about them and their movement. Um, but it is something that will happen, and you have to realize if you're going to speak your message in the world, there will always be people who object to it. And the best thing to do, for the most part, is simply ignore it, or sometimes to use it as a teaching moment. Um, there certainly are things in the world um, that I disagree with, but I rarely comment on them. At least in strong terms. If I do, I try to make a polite argument for the most part, because nothing else is going to make any difference. And generally speaking, um, people will reconsider their situations and sometimes change their opinions, um, but not because someone else is attacking them. And Jason says, "Well said, Lord Don." Well, thank you. I'm put in mind of the people who regularly try to picket Witches Fest in New York. Um, and of course, they're doing it only for their own ego because obviously it's not going to have any effect on anyone there, um, because that's not how you influence people's thoughts. Um, and for us, as we go forward, we need to remember um, how we feel when people behave badly and make sure we don't behave badly ourselves. Um, if we wish to make an argument for a certain point of view, we need to remember that we need to do that in a loving and positive manner, um, because nothing else has any chance of making a difference. The best way, of course, is through example. And, people, again, will sometimes reconsider their point of view and change it. But, it takes good reasons to make them do that. Um, Not acting like a spoiled toddler. And um, there have always been lots of spoiled toddlers in the world, so that's not a surprise. But and we cannot control necessarily what they do, but we can always control our reaction to it. And when we talk about peace, this is again, it's part of the whole situation. I was talking about how when we started the peace campaign, we had people objecting to it on the idea that you can't possibly have perfect peace. And the response was simply to politely say, "We know that, but we can have greater peace." And I often say And I'm going to say again that, the thing that you do is the next right thing. Things aren't going to go always the way that you want them to. They're not always going to go um, easily. And, all you can do is control your reaction to situations and make sure that you choose the next positive thing to do. Now, of course, we are human, and of course, we have reactions, but generally speaking, we want to consider always um, where we're trying to get to in life. If we're trying to get to a world of peace and justice, then we have to think in terms of behaving this way ourselves. We have to think in terms of how do you influence people's understandings, people's ideas, to help them to embrace ideas of peace and justice. And um, again, it's through example, it's through loving argument, and also, portraying the results that you hope to see through art, literature, media, etc. This is also very helpful. People react to to these subjects. Um, Having an argument about something almost never makes a positive solution about it, but influencing people's opinion by showing them why peace and justice is better, that makes a big difference. Now, that's not to say that you should not stand up for your rights. That's not to say that you should not resist oppression. Of course, you should. Um, but you also have to consider what is the most effective way to do that. And um, and to make sure you do not become the very thing that you object to yourself. So as we go forward, we will deal with trolls. In fact, I think every day this week, there's been at least one troll to show up on in my chat room, and I generally just ignore them. Um, and I think that's the best thing to do for the most part. Um, but in this case, I also want to emphasize you don't become them. You have achieved nothing beneficial by yourself becoming a troll. And Lavola says there's no higher vibration than peace and love. I agree with that. And making lemonade from lemons is definitely great peace. Absolutely. And hello to Brian in the chat room. It's good to see you, Brian. And Brian and I were on Tarot Thursday last night. If you were with us, I hope you enjoyed it. If not, you can see it here on Pagan World TV. We had a lovely night of doing readings for people. Um, and that is always a lot of fun. And if I recall correctly, next week, Tarot Thursday will have its normal host, Reverend Mary Hawk, Reverend Brian Ellicott, and myself doing a triple header, which will be something we have not done previously, I believe. And that will be a lot of fun. And it's always interesting to put yourself out there this way, that way, in general. And last night, Reverend Brian made an interesting statement about how challenging it was to do open readings on the floor of the Parliament of the World's Religions. And, you talk about putting yourself out there, that definitely was a place to do it because there are all kinds of different points of view on the psychic arts present at that event, some positive, some negative. But to put yourself out in an open and loving manner, and I think that is always what, in the end, we need to do. It always is, I think, the right choice um, for the way to present yourself in the world. Now, again, we're all human. We all have moments when we cannot quite rise to the highest of vibrations, and we shouldn't be beating up on ourselves for that either. but rather making the resolution that we will always try to rise to those highest vibrations, um, while simultaneously being practical. It's an interesting walk. I have been publicly Corellian my entire life. I think the first time I came out of the closet, so to speak, was in junior high school at the age of 13. And I've had relatively little problems over the years. I have occasionally encountered negative reactions, but not terribly often. And I think part of the reason for that is that I've always put myself forward wherever possible in that open and loving and reasonable manner. It was never a challenge to the people I was speaking with, but rather a sharing. And I found for the most part that has been very well received. Now, Brian says, my various closet experience has been a mixed bag. And that I'm sure that for everyone, there's always truth to that. And it depends in part on who you are and where you are. And like I say, I have had occasionally bad reactions, but for the most part, um, I have had positive results in being public. That is not to say there have never been any bad moments. The famous city council meeting in Hoopston some 20, well, more or less exactly 20 years ago, um, was certainly one of the scariest ones, and we've talked about that quite a bit over time. Maybe we'll take some time to look back on that next week as we come to the closing of this calendar year. Um, but life always goes on. And like I say, the next thing that you do is always to find, wherever possible, that next right positive thing and go forward. Um, and of course, there are going to be times that you just want to stop. You want to stop and rest and step back. And sometimes that's the right thing to do until it's time to move forward again when you choose the next right positive thing. Um, and to me, that is always the answer. And Brian says, rise to the challenge and expectation that we will always get it right has been the hardest part. Well, that's very true. Um, we cannot expect of ourselves that we will always get it right. Nor can we expect that of anyone else. We're humans. We don't always get things right. So we must be forgiving of ourselves, and we must be, to some extent, forgiving of others. Um, and like I say, love and peace and the next right thing, I think, is always the best way to approach it. So, with that, I see we've come to the end of our half hour. I will be back on Monday. And if I remember correctly, Monday actually is the, yes, Monday actually is the ambient holiday, but I will be here. And I hope, I imagine I will not have a large audience on that day, but wherever you may be, I hope that you enjoy the ambient holiday as much as you enjoyed our holiday of Yule. And with that, let us close with our prayer, and I will wish you a wonderful day. And Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do in our lives, and we ask you to help us to always find that next right thing to do. Sometimes in life, it's hard to see the next right thing to do, but it's always there. And we ask you to help us to always find it whenever possible. And when we cannot find it, to help us to be understanding of ourselves and of the world. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love, and knowing you are always with us, but from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. And I thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always, and I will see you on Monday.